Hello, Dave Hill here. Welcome to Lesson 10. Okay, I hope you've been practicing hard. You've been working out on your technique. We talked a lot about warm-up last lesson, and I want you to do that. Even take a minute here before this next lesson and maybe warm up before we go on to what we're going to play today. Okay? What we're going to talk about today, while it will require some technique, it's also going to be a little bit about theory today, because we're going to talk about it's going to be our first lesson really to discuss the concept of modes, okay? And we're going to apply it over a variety of things, but I'm going to talk to you about what the whole concept of modes is, and we're going to start off with some basic ones, but very important to understand these, okay? So let's just take a look at the board here for a minute as we continue on here. And you can see I've written on the board two different major scales, okay? Now, if you can't remember, or if you want a refresher of a major scale, this is what a major scale sounds like. It's the basis, it's the scale that pretty much all Western music is based off of. All Western melodies and harmonies are based off patterns and harmonies and melodies of this major scale system. That should sound pretty familiar. Okay, now if you look at the relationship of the intervals, the space between each note, you can see there's a pattern here, okay? And you can even see it on your guitar. If I were to play this scale on one string, you could just visualize what it looks like. There's a whole step, right? That's what the W stands for. Between the first and the second note, between the tonic and the second note. There's another whole step right here, between the D and the E in this case, because we're talking about the key of C. And then you can see on your guitar, when you go to the next note in the music system, you go to the next fret, which is a half step, right? That's what that H refers to. Okay, and then there's another whole step right there, from the E to the, or rather the F to the G. And then from the G to the A, there's another whole step. And from the A to the B, there's another whole step. So there's three whole steps there. And then finally the last note is again a half step. Okay, so that's a 7-note scale. Now, obviously, we don't finger on the guitar major scales like this on one string. It's not a very practical way to play it. Okay, so we play it like this. But, you know, and of course, in this particular position of the neck, I can actually play up higher within the neck and play up to the 6th degree in the next octave, because I have a big enough range in this position to play. In fact, I can even play lower. And these are all the notes in the key of C in this position. But let's just clarify something. When something is said to be the first mode of a major scale, what we're talking about is the name of the mode that's called the Ionian Mode. In other words, the scale that is built from this C to this C is named from the Greek names of modes. They're called modes, and they're basically referring to all the different starting steps of the major scale. So the first major scale mode is an Ionian mode. Okay, let me write that down. And that's basically starting from the root of a major scale and going up to the next root. And that's called the Ionian mode. And it sounds perfect over a major chord or any kind of major 7th chord or major 6th chord, okay? Now, we're going to compare the different types of modes. There's actually, you can start on every degree of the major scale and get a different type of scale, okay? And those are referred to by different mode names, okay? So what I've done here, just to show you to compare, is I've got another major scale written over here. Okay, now notice that it's in a different key. Okay, it's written in the key of B flat. Okay, so the relationship of the notes are exactly the same, but they're starting on a different tonic. Okay, so if you started on B flat, right? Or you'd have that scale. Okay, it's the same relationship of the notes, so you'll see whole step, half step, whole step, half step. I'm sorry, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. When you do it like this. But it's exactly the same scale as this in a different key. Okay? Now, why did I write one in C and one in B flat? Okay? Well, I want you to see something. When you can see that if I looked at the second degree of this B flat major scale, okay, and let's just say for our purposes here, I put another C right here, and I got rid of the B flat here on the bottom. In fact, I got rid of the actual name of the scale right there, okay? Now, let's check it out. If I take this B flat scale, but I started from the second degree of B flat, and I just have this. Okay? Now, there's a perfectly legitimate scale. It sounds interesting, but let's just compare that to the C major scale, just for our purposes, to see how it's different, okay? So we know that a C major scale is a whole step, half step, or 1, 2, 3, major third, 1, 2, major third, fourth, fifth, major sixth, major seventh, root, okay? But check this out. Here's a whole step, and then here's a half step. So what does that make this? Is it a major third? Is it the same relationship between this note and this note, C to E? No, it's not. We know it's what's called a minor third. So this is the second mode of a major scale, and we can see how it's different from a major scale, a typical major scale. This is what you call a Dorian scale. Okay, we're going to talk about that now. Okay, remember, it's the second mode in this case from B flat, but I've written it out in C so you can compare how it differs from the Ionian mode. Okay, so this is C Ionian, this is C Dorian. Okay, so C Dorian, we already know, has a minor third. Okay, it has the same type of second. It's the major second, but it has a minor third. Okay. Now, if we continue up the scale, remember we're just playing a B flat, but we're starting it from C, and we're comparing it to a C major scale. Okay, it has the same kind of fourth. Okay, perfect fourth here, perfect fifth. So it sounds these two notes are common to C and B and C Dorian, C Ionian and C Dorian. Okay, it has a sixth degree right here, so that's an interesting note right there. It's a major sixth. But check it out. When we get up to the seventh degree of the scale, look at how it's different from the seventh degree in the Ionian mode. It's a flat seven. Okay, this pen is about to die. So, a Dorian scale has a flat third, and it also has a flat seven, and that's what's different about it from the major scale, right? Flat third as opposed to major third, and it also has a flat seven. Okay, so what do you think the kind of chord that it's going to fit perfectly over? Well, let's talk about it. Here's C major. It's the first chord in a C major scale, and remember this scale was the second degree of a B flat major scale. We got rid of the B flat, and we just started it from C and continued playing the notes. Okay, so the second degree, the harmonized second degree chord is actually a minor chord. Okay. In C major, this chord would be D minor, and in B flat major, this chord would be C minor. So it's actually a C minor 7 chord. It fits perfectly over a C minor 7 chord, or a progression within B flat that C minor 7 is a predominant chord in. Okay, so what we're learning here is that there's different types of scales within a major scale. Okay. We have the major scale that we commonly just call the major scale, but it's actually, in reality, referred to as the Ionian mode, the first mode of the major scale. But you can see that a Dorian scale is also exists, and in this case, comparing it to C major, we do that to show you the difference between an Ionian scale and a major scale, okay, or an Ionian scale and a Dorian scale. So what I'm going to do now is I want you to practice making melodies between two different modes. In other words, a C major mode and a C Dorian mode, which, as we've just realized, is no different than going from C major to B flat major. But I'm going to keep the C tonic happening because I'm going to play C major and C minor 7, okay? So let's just play around with that a little bit, just so we can kind of get the feel of that. So going back to our patterns here, let's just take a look at one pattern that would, or one position that would work out really well. We can play C major right here. Fits within this shape right here, okay? And when we go to C Dorian, remember, we're just basically playing B flat major, but we're thinking of it from C. But we know that it belongs within this system of B flat major. But we're going to kind of feel it around the C shape right here. Okay, so let's examine these two sounds here back to back. Here's C major first of all. Pretty much stop on any note. And it sounds pretty good. You got to be a little careful of the fourth degree. The fourth degree of the major scale is not a great note to end on. So you want to kind of play past that. There's some notes that really sound good. The E, which is the third of the scale. The major 7 sounds really good. In fact, these are the chord tones of C major 7. Sometimes the 9 sounds good. Okay, so it's a very consonant and very mellow sound. Now let's compare that to our Dorian sound now, okay? I'm going to switch on a minor 7 chord so you can hear the difference. Now right away, you hear the darker sound of the minor mode. There's the minor third that changes right away. Remember, we're just playing B flat major, but we're hearing it against C, so it sounds like C Dorian. There's the major 6 of the scale. It sounds pretty compelling. There's the flat 7. So we have the two distinctive notes that change in C Dorian. The flat third replaces the major third, and the flat 7 replaces the major 7. So let's kind of play around with that. Now in the back of my head, I know that I'm still playing B flat major, but in my ear, I'm hearing C minor is the chord. So I'm going to experiment. Now in this case, the C Dorian mode, the Dorian mode has pretty much every note sounds good. You can pretty much end on any note and it sounds pretty good. There's the minor third, the 9th, the root, flat 7, the 6th, the 5th, the 4th even sounds good. The 4th didn't sound good on the major chord, but it sounds pretty good on the minor chord. I used a little passing note there. Let's go back to major. There's that 4th. It's a little weird again. Back to minor. Back to major. You can find certain notes that just overlap. There's that 6. It sounds good on both chords. Okay, so it's kind of fun. You can find the notes that overlap nicely between the two chords. And then those give you the safe notes that will sound good. In this case, the root, these are the notes that overlap. The root, the second, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth. These notes are all common in the C Dorian mode. Okay? So now what I'm going to do now is I've got a little progression going on here I'm going to show you. And it's going to encompass the two keys that we just talked about, but it's going to be in my loop station there, so it's a little easier to play over. So it's going to be C major 7, going back and forth to this kind of a sound, which is basically a fancy 5 chord. It's a 5 chord of C. And it's going to go back and forth between C Ionian, and it's going to go to C minor 7, into F7, and that's going to be my C Dorian mode. Okay? So, it's essentially the same thing as going C major to B flat major. Okay? But what that's going to do now is it's going to give us a chance to hear the mode shift with the same tonic. The tonic is the C sound that's going back and forth. Okay, but it's going from a C major to a C Ionian mode, and that now will give us a chance to kind of hear melodies and play in different positions of our neck and try to make this sound good. Okay, so let's see what my loop station sounds like here. That's very funky, isn't it? That's what we got going right there. And it's going to go through I think eight times through that cycle, and then it goes to Dorian. Okay? Listen to how it sounds to Dorian now. It's actually F13, but it's basically F7. Okay, but it's cool. Now we've got a 2-key chord progression, but it's sharing the same tonic. So now let's go ahead and start out by playing the major scale in C. 2, 3, 4. Get ready for the B flat major scale, or C Dorian. Back to C major. Now I'm going to just kind of improvise in these two modes. Find some common notes between the two keys. There's the common notes, the D and the G and the C. The A sounds good. See, I didn't have to change anything. Now I'm going to change the notes. Now see how that E really comes out? That E is really strong in indicating the Ionian sound. So is the B. Now here's the E flat. That B flat really comes out. Okay? So, what I'm trying to show you here is that it's really just two keys, but the sound of C major to C minor really is indicated strongly by certain notes within the two keys, right? In this case, it really comes down to a couple of main notes. It's the major thirds going to the minor thirds in this case, when the chord goes to a minor seventh, and it's the major seventh of the C major chord going to the flat seven on the C minor chord. And the creative thing to do is, or the skillful thing to try to do, is to make it sound smooth when you connect between these two different types of modes here, and to make it sound melodically connected when you play. And that really comes down to how well you know your patterns of your scales and how well you can make up melodies in your scales. And that's what I was trying to show you when I was playing. So try to come up with some simple exercises like this. Right now, we've just been working on the Ionian to the Dorian modes, but we're going to continue on with a lot of other examples of modes in other lessons. So have fun with this, and I'll see you on the next lesson. Talk to you soon. Dave Hill signing off.